and welcome back to the National Marine Aquarium. My name is Xavier and today we're going to be doing another live stream tour. Today we're going to be looking at some of our clawed creatures here at the aquarium, the crustaceans and the crabs. So we're going to start today with our spider crab, which is found over here in this tank. So he's down there on the left. So we're starting in the Plymouth Sound area today because a lot of the crabs that we have at the aquarium can be found off our coasts here in the UK. It's just like this spider crab here. So this is a spiny spider crab. And you can see with all his little spikes, he definitely lives up to that name. So these guys can grow up to 20 centimeters in diameter of their body. So at the moment he's probably around 15 or so, but he could grow another 5 centimeters larger and his legs would be all in the same sort of size. Some other species of spider crabs can grow with a leg span up to 4 meters. So they're really huge, but they live a lot deeper in the water. These guys, you'll typically find them from anywhere in the northeast Atlantic down to the Mediterranean. Very rarely could you find them up in Scotland because they prefer slightly warmer waters. But due to climate change, what we're seeing is a bit of a migration further northwards as the colder waters up north get a little bit warmer and a lot more suitable for these guys. So one of the special things about these guys is they can undertake an 8-month migration in the autumn. They do this when they're spawning or when they're about to molt. And some of the individuals in these migrations have been recorded travelling up to 100 miles just to come to the same area to spawn, which is a huge journey. Now for most crabs, they walk sideways, but because of these spider crab's long legs, they're able to walk forwards. So this is one of the crab species that doesn't walk sideways like our typical crabs that you think of on the beach. Hello to Broad Square Primary School in Liverpool. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're appreciating our spider crab here. When they're on their migrations, they do what is known as podding. So a group of crabs is called a cast. But when they're on a migration, they perform a phenomenon known as podding. And this is where a few hundred individuals, up to a few thousand, will all group together for protection while they're molting or coming together to spawn. The biggest pod that's ever been found off the coast of the UK was in Dorset, off the coast of Dorset, where they reckon there were about 50,000 spider crabs all in one big pod under the sea, only to a depth about 4.5 meters. So you can imagine snorkeling or swimming along the surface of the water, looking down and seeing 50,000 spider crabs a few meters below you. Can you imagine the size of that spiny pile? So you can find these guys off our coasts. Usually they don't live that close to the shoreline. Because of their long limbs, they're a little bit more fragile, so they can't deal that well with the wave action. So you find them a little bit deeper. You can find them in rock pools, but they tend to be the younger juveniles. Hi Leo, aged 8. I hope you're enjoying homeschooling in Exeter. How old is this one? It's really hard to say how old they are because we don't have them from birth, but judging by the size of this one, it's only going to be a couple years old. The bigger ones, they can get up to 20 centimeters, I say, in the carapace. This guy's still got a little bit of growing to do. Hi Chloe and Connor. I love sea creatures too, Freya. Of course, we also have some gobies in this tank, so you can see some of these little gobies swimming around. These are little 2-spot gobies. And we've also got some sand gobies along the sand. So, where is the mouth on the crab? This is a really good question. Crabs and lobsters and shrimp have really complicated mouth parts. They're made up of 3 what are called maxillae, which are specialized little claws inside the mouth, and then it's got 3 more little legs called maxillipeds, which work in front. And all these little arms, these little mouthpieces, they work together to break up food and pass it into their mouth so they can get it down into their stomach. They have lots of different parts, very complicated mouth parts with very complicated names. Hi, Abby, age 8 in Plymouth. We can't wait to have you back in the aquarium. What is this crab's name? Oh, we haven't actually named this crab yet because he's a new guy to the aquarium. So perhaps you guys could come up with some good name ideas for our spider crab here. Hi, Marco and Matteo from the Isle of Wight. Elizabeth wants to know, do they change shells? Yes, so like all crabs and crustaceans, they will do a molt, and we'll show you a molt of a different species of crab in a bit. But let's move on now and leave our little spider crab here. Cool, so we're going to move along and we're going to go and find our squat lobster. So our squat lobster isn't a lobster and it isn't a crab. It's actually related to both of them, but they're in a different family, a different order, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we've got some baby ones in this tank here. I hope the sound quality hasn't changed too much for you guys as we're moving around the aquarium. So you can just about see these guys with their little claws and heads poking out. So squat lobsters sort of do look a bit like lobsters, but with their tail folded under their belly. And this is useful for them as a little protection and enables them to hide in smaller crevices. So Jake asked, why do they change their shell? So they change their shell every time they get bigger. Because they have a hard exoskeleton, it doesn't grow as they grow. So us as humans, we have bones on the inside, an endoskeleton, and this will grow as we grow. But with crabs and crustaceans, every time they grow, they have to get rid of their shell and grow one that's bigger. Call the crab Samoa, that's a good name. It's Pinchy, I like that good name. Frank, good idea, Ben. I like the name Frank. My first cat was named Frank. Captain Krabby. Some great names, guys. Keep them coming in. So these little squat lobsters can grow up to about 3.5 centimeters long in their body, and their claws tend to be 1.5 times the length of their body. So in all, they could almost get to about 9 or 10 centimeters long. Peter Parker. Peter Parker is a good name for the spider crab. Spider-Man, spider crab, I like that. Maybe it has to be Peter Parker. So what do these guys eat? These little squat lobsters are filter feeders and scavenger. You can see him picking through the substrate, picking through the sand, looking for little morsels of food, which it could then eat up. They'll eat little bits of dead organic matter that's fallen to the bottom. And they'll also pick particles, pick plankton out of the water column going by. Caleb the crab. I think we're going to have to get some more crabs so we can give them all names. Because you guys have come up with some great names. Spike, he does look spiky. Very good. So, these guys, with their folded under the body, actually makes them quite good swimmers. So if there's a predator and they want to escape, they can flap their tails really hard and they swim in a backwards motion, shooting backwards, and they can move really fast. And there are some species of juvenile squat lobsters that will actually remain pelagic, so they remain in the water column for various events, and you can find what are like schools, like pods of these large amounts of juvenile squat lobsters pushing through the water. Now we only have one species of squat lobster in the aquarium. This is the Galatheus squamifera, or the blue-striped squat lobster. But there are over 900 species of squat lobster, and they're really diverse, and they can live in a wide range of very different environments. So there are species of squat lobster that live deep in the bottom of the ocean, tens of miles beneath the sea, around hydrothermal sea vents, which are one of the most extreme places to live. Hi Jen and Jess, age 4 from Plymouth. We miss having you here at the aquarium too, and I assure you some of our animals definitely do too. It's been very quiet around here. It's not been the same without people, without you, the lovely public, coming and appreciating our animals. So what else can we say about the squat lobster? Has anyone ever been to Lanzarote? So in Lanzarote, they have the only species of squat lobster that lives above ground. So it is an underwater species, but it lives in an underwater cave in Lanzarote, and it's completely blind. And it's what's known as the blind albino cave crab. And it's one of these little squat lobster's cousins. Hi Ollie, Sam and Amy. Hi Ryan. Hope you're appreciating our squat lobster. Hi Emily and Grace in South Yorkshire. Hope you're enjoying the talk. So we're going to move on from the squat lobster here, and we're going to look at another of our British crab species. And this crab species is a little bit more commercially important because we eat these as well as sell them on for food in other countries. So this is the edible crab, or the brown crab. So it's really, I find it quite easy to identify these guys, because when I think of edible crab and you look at these guys, what do they look like? If you look at that shell, look all around the edge, what does it look like to you? Maybe if you're from Devon and Cornwall, it might come a bit quicker. It looks a bit like a pasty, and that's how I remember it's the edible crab. It's got this pie crust edge that's really, really iconic. So another reason they're called edible crabs is because, as I said earlier, they are a commercially important species, and about 1/3 of the weight of one of these crabs is edible meat. 1/3 of which will be white crab meat, and 2/3 of which will be brown crab meat. Just saying hello to the little Shani there, wondering what we're doing here, interrupting his calm day. So we usually have sand in here, but because we've got no general public, none of you guys coming here, it gives us a fantastic opportunity to do a really good deep clean. And the cleaner these tanks are, the happier all the critters are, and the more interesting things you might see. That's right, Alexander, it is a pasty. It looks exactly like a pasty. So these guys can grow pretty big, typically around 15 to 25 centimeters. So this guy is not full size yet. But they could probably, the biggest one found, I think, was around 267 millimeters, so about 27 centimeters, which is really big. If you imagine your 30 centimeter ruler that you take to school, almost as wide as one of those, so really big. And a crab that size could be almost 100 years old and weigh up to 3 kilograms. This guy though, he's only a few years old, and we could probably work it out. So we know through scientific study how fast these crabs grow. We know that before they're 8 years old, they grow about 1 centimeter a year, and then after that, they grow about 2 millimeters a year. So this guy, he's probably a good 5 to 10 years old, I reckon. And typically they'll live to about 25 to 30 years. Yes, so we do also have starfish in these tanks. We have a lot of starfish around the coast of the UK and off Plymouth Sound, which is why they fit in really well around here. So Joe asked, how old is this crab? We reckon this crab's about 5 to 10 years old, and they can grow typically up to about 25 to 30 years. So what eats these guys? They are very big and they've got those huge, strong claws, but they are vulnerable as well. So not only do we eat these guys as humans, but they're also preyed upon by octopus and sea bass. And the smaller ones, if they're living in shallower waters, may fall prey to seagulls or cormorants, so they can be preyed upon by our British birds. The females, they grow about half. His name is Krusty, right, Sam Mac? I think if his name wasn't Krusty, it definitely should be. So the females, they grow about half as fast as the males. So I think this one's a male. I'd have to check underneath, but he's a lot bigger. And the females grow half as fast because they have to expel a lot more energy into laying their eggs and growing their eggs and looking after their eggs, as opposed to growing bigger. So could anyone guess how many eggs a female crab could carry? And while you're guessing, I'll answer some of the questions that pop up. So someone asked, do edible crabs shed their shells? And just bear with the sound quality as I'm moving around. They do shed their shells. So this, although it looks like a full crab, isn't actually. It's only just the shell of the crab. So you can see this little line, this little crack that goes all the way around along the back here. And what will happen is, as the crab grows and gets a little bit bigger, it will be too big for this exoskeleton, for this shell, which is very strong, as you can hear. So it doesn't flex, so it'll pull itself out of this crack backwards, claws and legs coming out last. And when that happens, it will just leave this guy sitting behind, and it'll have really soft shell afterwards. So once it's got rid of this hard one, it will be really soft, and it will then go and hide or burrow until its shell goes hard again, solidifies. So there's some really good guesses for the amount of eggs. 50, 100,000. I haven't seen anyone who's guessed high enough. So if you think about it, the eggs are actually really, really tiny. And they hold their eggs. So this is a male. You can see it's a male because it's got this deeper V on its telson, on its tail. But the females, they have a wider V, and it'll hold its eggs underneath by the legs. And the females, when they're in this state, are known as buried. And when they're buried, this goes for pretty much all crustaceans, crabs and lobsters. When they're buried, they're illegal to catch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's actually probably the closest guess I've seen. So, yes, they can have as many as 250,000 to 3 million eggs, which is a lot of eggs. Imagine carrying 250 to 3 million tiny babies between your legs. You'd struggle to get around. And what they do with these eggs is, once they're ready to lay them and spawn them, 150,000, very good guess. Once they've laid them and spawned, they'll find an area suitable where they'll spawn them into the water column, and they'll become larvae, and these larvae will be carried around in our seas to be distributed all around the coast of the UK and their geographical range. The biggest spawning event actually happens quite close to us here. So off South Devon, there's a huge migration that takes place later in the year, where females can travel up to 18 kilometers a week with their 250,000 to 3 million eggs, because there's a really nice spot off South Devon where it's got perfect soft substrate, it's nice and deep, and it's got good access to oceanic currents. So lots of these crabs will all meet up off our coasts and spawn millions and millions and millions of eggs into the water. So why might they have so many eggs? We'll talk about that as we go downstairs to have a look at our porcelain crab, Mumbo, down in the biozone area. So crabs need to lay a lot of eggs. And this is to increase the chances of the young reaching adulthood and surviving and being successful. So for humans and a lot of other species, we have what is known as a low fecundity. I'm not going to talk too much now because you won't be able to hear because of all the echoes. This is our back of house area, one of our access routes. Again, special privileged access behind the scenes. And shoot, we are in the biozone area. Cool. So we'll talk a little bit more about the eggs and then we'll try and find our little porcelain crab. Ah, there he is. So there are porcelain crabs just in there. Can you see them? So crabs lay a lot of eggs because they don't invest a lot of energy in raising their young. So by laying lots and lots and lots and lots of eggs, in order for a few to survive, it's okay because many can die. We don't actually have any pregnant crabs in the aquarium at the moment. We try and keep males because we're not trying to achieve any breeding with our crabs. So we're now in the biozone area and we're looking at Mumbo, our little porcelain crab. So he's very small and he's not actually a true crab. So our little porcelain crab here is more closely related to the squat lobster and the hermit crab than it is to, say, our edible crab. What's really interesting about these guys is their feeding method. So as with most crabs, they'll pick apart they'll scavenge or they'll hunt and they'll use their claws to pick apart. But this guy's main feeding method is his first maxillipeds, so his first mouthpieces have evolved into almost like a fan, and it will waft these fans in the water column, catching little shrimp and krill and artemia and all this sort of stuff, which it will then scrape off with another arm piece, with another mouthpiece, and eat it, pass it down into its mandibles. I know it's very hard to see. You can sort of see him moving up and down there, just breathing underwater. So unlike other crabs, this crab is actually a lot more fragile. It does have a hard exoskeleton, but the part of the way it got its name porcelain crab is because its exoskeleton, its shell, is actually quite fragile, quite brittle, a bit like porcelain, so quite easy to break. There are over 300 species of porcelain crab, so this is just our little anemone porcelain crab. Neopetralistis maculatus, if you were interested in its binomial name. And as you can see, they'll just hide, this species will just hide between crevices and look for food to filter out. They can be brown to blue to green to white, but they don't grow much bigger than this, about 5 centimeters in width. Being asked what's the biggest crab in the world? Well, some big spider crabs, as I say, they can have leg spans of up to 4 meters, so that's really big. But this guy, very much on the small scale of the crustacean family. Cool. We have another one that sits on this guy's name is Mumbo. We have another porcelain anemone crab around the corner. We'll see if we can spot him on the way to our last crab, our hermit crab Hulk. So, on this way, and we'll go back up to Hulk. So we have another one of these porcelain crabs, this porcelain anemone crab, more in its natural environment, and maybe hiding. So this is a blanket anemone here. So a bit like the anemone we think of in relation to clownfish. The porcelain crabs will also inhabit anemones, and they'll use this as protection, as well as they'll feed on the mucus that's produced by the anemone. Yeah, I think it is the Japanese spider crab that is the biggest in the world. They're the ones that will grow really, really big. I just wanted to show you that blanket anemone because that's where the anemone crab, the little porcelain crab, is usually live. So we're going to do another quick, brisk walk around the aquarium to our last crab tank. We'll let you appreciate some of the fantastic work of local artist John Lilly, who designed this fantastic fluorescent neon wall for us. Lovely marine biology themed walls. And usually we have the lights off and you'd be walking down there and it'd be completely lit with UV lights. Past Eddystone, past our jellyfish tanks. Down through Jawsome. I do apologise if the sound quality changes. We can't help that, I'm afraid, but we're just making this little journey. So, our big hermit crab. So I do apologise if the sound's a little bit hard to hear in this area. There's quite a lot of glass and other surfaces. So this is Hulk, who is our famous hermit crab. Different to the hermit crabs we have in the UK, this is actually a warm water species. And this is a white spotted hermit crab. And this warm water species can usually be found in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, really common in Australia and Hawaii. And just look at him, he is magnificent. So most of the hermit crab species we have in the UK only grow to about 4 centimetres, whereas a hermit crab like this can grow up to almost 25-30 centimetres. And that includes the bit of body that's hidden in the shell. So you can see his antennae. He's got 2 sets of antennae and these 2 compound eyes on stalks. And these big old claws. It's very common in hermit crabs for the left claw to be the biggest claw. So that's an excellent question. Are the crabs more active during the day? A lot of crab species are nocturnal. They're much more, especially some of the ones which are more hunters, because they'll find it easier to catch their prey, like gastropods and little mollusks. So Hulk is famous because, and the reason why we named him Hulk is not only because he's big, but also he's a little bit clumsy. You can probably see him going around here, falling all over. And what's happened with our Hulk here is that with all this clumsiness, he's managed to break and damage his shell. And this is not ideal because every time he grows and he molts, he's going to need a bigger shell. And it's really hard for us to find a big shell for a big hermit crab like this. So actually what we've done is we've got in contact with the Plymouth College of Art, and we're talking with them to try to get a competition going to build Hulk a new shell. So we've had talks about doing 3D printed shell and glass blowing shells. So it'll be really interesting to see what they're able to come up with to give our Hulk a new house. If you guys wanted to help us design Hulk's new shell, perhaps you could do a drawing and colour it in of how you think Hulk's new shell should look. And you can post that in the comments or on our Facebook page, and we'd be really happy to see some of the designs that you come up with. So how old is Hulk? Really big hermit crabs like this could live up to 30 years in the wild. So if you look at the size of him, he's probably a good 12 years old, I'd say. I'm Not an expert, I couldn't say for sure, but there's a good guess. He's probably around 12 years old by the size of him. Here we go. So one of our biologists is actually going to give him a little bit of feed. So there we go. In that bowl, it looks like we have some crab, or maybe some octopus tentacles. And we don't just give them his food straight up, because they're quite intelligent animals. We want to make them work for their food a little bit. So we put it in a little bowl, we give him a little challenge to make him really work for his food. So why are his claws hairy? His claws are hairy because they're really good as little sensory filaments, so they can help sense changes in the current, in the temperature, and the salinity around him. Another name for this crab is actually the hairy hermit crab, the Hawaiian hairy hermit crab. That explains all the hairiness. How long have we had Hulk for? I'm not sure. I think we've had Hulk for a good 6+ years. I haven't been working here that long, but I know that he is a well-known, notorious resident of the aquarium here. So who else is in Hulk's tank? We just have some little damselfish in here. Just some little reef fish, so he doesn't get too lonely, and so the tank looks nice and active and pretty. The females of the hermit crab, they carry less eggs than our edible crab upstairs, so nowhere near 250 to 3 million. But they'll have a few hundred, and they'll carry these eggs inside the shell, just like in a backpack. So Hulk's natural habitat, that's an excellent question, Helen, is actually very similar to this. So you'd find him in warmer water coral reefs, lagoons, on the sand, so they like nice fine substrate like this because they're able to search through it for food. And you can also find them in seagrass habitats down to around 50 meters underwater. It's another reason why seagrass preservation is really important, and that's because it houses a lot of species like this, really good nurseries for small fish, and really important source of carbon storage. So those little spiny, spiky things on him are exactly that. They're little spiny spikes. And this is just to make his shell more coarse and rough, and it actually helps make it stronger structurally. So one of the problems faced by hermit crabs, as well as many other species, is plastic pollution. And what can happen, especially within hermit crabs, is when they grow and they're looking for their new shell, they could grab a plastic bottle or a tin can or another bit of rubbish, and they could try and use that as their shell. And obviously it's not going to be strong enough, it's not going to be hard enough, and it's not going to offer him the protection he needs. So he's more likely to fall prey to a bigger animal. So what does he eat? He'll eat a bit of everything. Hermit crabs are scavengers, and they'll eat a lot of, it's called detritus, which is organic matter and dead things that have fallen down to the seafloor that they're able to pick apart and recycle. So these guys will eat other crabs, other smaller crabs, and they'll go for, as well, sea snails, and they will eat algae. Sarah Walker, plastic is evil. Yes, it is evil, especially underwater, especially in our marine and freshwater realms, just because of the incredible damage it can do to fish. Hi, and thank you too, Ronnie. Much appreciated. I'm glad you've been enjoying yourself. So why has he got red antennas? So the red antennas you're looking at are actually his eyes. So they have what are known as compound eyes, which can look almost in 360 degrees. And they have these on stalks. so they can look out of their shell if they're hidden away and see what's going on around. They do have these 2 long antennae though. They've got these really long white ones, which are used more for sensing things in their proximity, and it's got the little ones on the inside, which are used for more technical sensing, so things like temperature, salinity, if there's any food, and it'll use those to help guide food into the mouth. So we're going to stop here at Hulk. We'll let you watch him for a little bit longer. Hopefully Hulk here could live to 30 years. Someone asked how old could they live to. It has been recorded that these guys can live up to 30 years, especially in marine aquaria where they're very well looked after. So sadly guys, I think we're probably going to have to end it there. But I really appreciate you coming and joining us on our little crab tour. I hope you've learned some things. I hope you've seen some things you've never seen before. And I hope you've been somewhat entertained. And we really look forward to having you back. Look out on our website for opening information and dates. We're still trying to work out our official opening date. But while we're closed, we're doing lots of work to make sure these guys are ready. All our tanks are ready for you guys to come back. If you are able to make a donation, it would be greatly appreciated. We are undertaking vital habitat research when it comes to things like seagrass, as well as other conservation projects in the local area that we need to help fund, as well as looking after all of these wonderful animals we have on display. It's not cheap. It can cost up to thousands of pounds a day just to keep these guys fed and watered. So any help you can give us while we're closed is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry I couldn't talk to you anymore, but look out for our next live stream in the coming weeks, and we'll see you again. Thank you very much. Lots of love. Thank you for joining us, and look after our oceans.